Hey, using Helm is great, right? Especially if you're talking about third-party applications or prepackaged applications that you want to deploy or services that you want to deploy in your cluster, it works like a charm. But when you talk about applications that are developed in-house, I quite often see DevOps or platform engineering teams trying to build some sort of abstraction to help their developers onboard their own applications. Many times they are not very familiar or comfortable with the underlying infrastructure, and they end up relying on the DevOps team to help them onboard these apps, which is not great because it creates toil on the DevOps team and it slows down the development, right, for developers to onboard their applications. So because of that, I started on this project, on kind of the side project, to help these developers onboard apps, right? And this side project can help developers to define their applications by just kind of entering the name, what policies to use, teams, add dependencies, environment variables, and all define applications in a very visual way without getting into the details or complexities of Kubernetes. And also, it helps DevOps or platform teams to build policies, right? Using that same kind of visual model. One of the things that I added recently is the capability of saving and sharing those definitions, because I also see a lot of work being duplicated within the same organization, maybe because teams are not aware they're trying to build similar things, or maybe another developer in my team wants a template to be able to build a new service, but at least they have something to base themselves off. So I started putting something together that allows these teams to save and share the definitions they build. So if I come in here, for example, I have my WordPress simple that I saved before, and I have it here. I'm working on kind of statistics around here, the number of times it was cloned or downloaded and so on. But I see added because I'm the owner and I share this publicly with other folks. If it's another user just searching for a WordPress, they would find this and they would see a button for clone. So when you click on edit, basically it loads all the kind of visual definitions, and you can see I have a MySQL DB here defined, and I have a WordPress defined. I have all my environment variables, volume info, and others. If I want to add it, for example, I can come in here and say I want to add a dependency. My WordPress should only come up once my SQL is up and running, and I can update and save this, or directly from here I can generate my my provider definition, and I can choose whatever provider Shippa supports. I'm using Shippa as the underlying application API, and I can choose Terraform, Crossplane, Pulumi, or you name it. So for example, if I choose Pulumi, Shippa generates not this one, not Terraform, sorry. If I generate a Pulumi one, you generate an index TypeScript file in here. And if you check under my Shippa account, I have no applications. I just have a framework that I created and I connected to a cluster, but I don't have any applications deployed. So if I just go into my terminal here, and you see, let me just remove this index that I have here. Basically what I have in front of you is a Pulumi kind of starter kit for TypeScript, right? Which you can do just with Pulumi create, for example. If I copy the index file that Shippa generated, I can see here, it generated a file for me for my app deployment, for my MySQL deployment, for example. And if I want, I can just run Pulumi up from here. Create new stack. I'll do WP for WordPress. The deployment will run. And you can see that as a developer, I created my WordPress definition for both the UI and my SQL environment variables, volume, and so on and so forth. And I generated the definition using Pulumi. So I don't need to get into the underlying complexity of Kubernetes, and it's a great way for me if you want to start your team using Pulumi or Crossplane or others. It's a great way for you to incentivize them to use it because it's easy to generate, right? The deployment is running, and if we go back to our Shippa dashboard, for example, I'm starting to see my applications here, and now these applications are being deployed on Kubernetes, right, for me. And directly from here, I can see all information on container images, environment variables. I can see the dependency map for my app, logs, and everything associated with my application. The same thing for my WordPress. I can see the logs. I can access my application. And you can see that as a developer, I don't have to kind of deal with the underlying complexity that Kubernetes brings. There you go, my WordPress running. And it's easy for you to kind of try out different providers, right? So if I just go Pulumi destroy, for example, my WP stack, and I say yes, this should delete my applications. If we go back to Shipa, applications are gone. And now, for example, if I go back into here and I say, well, now I want to try this using crossplane, for example, and I generate, it creates a crossplane YAML file. If I go back in on my terminal again and I say crossplane YAML, for example, you can see the definition. Oops. Let me just change this. Let me see, where am I? Okay. And I do crossplane, for example. You can see the definition of my file here using crossplane and using Shipa, so it's a much simpler definition in this case, which makes it easier for any developer to understand. But I can just come here and say kubectl apply crossplane YAML. There you go. It will create both my DB and my WordPress UI, all based on the definition that I saved here. And if I go back to Shipa, for example, I'll see the deployment is starting. We'll start first the deployment of my SQL, and then soon we'll start the deployment of WordPress. But point being is, easy for me to define an application, define variables, dependencies, volume, network policy, for example, or even if I want to define a policy, save this config and share that with my team, and start using Kubernetes a lot easier and any other providers. Is this helpful? I hope this can show an example of kind of an option from a developer experience. Thanks.